Welcome back, guys. We are continuing on with the Mark IV kit assembly, and we are on chapter 5. This is the Nextruder assembly. I think this chapter was the one I was the most nervous about because I felt like this Nextruder is so fancy and newly updated that it would be really hard to assemble, but surprisingly, it was not bad at all. The tools that we will need for this chapter are some Allen keys and Torx keys, the needle nose pliers, and a permanent marker. And we will start with the filament sensor. We need the Nextruder heatsink, the Hall filament sensor, the Prusa ball holder, a magnet, one spring, a steel ball, and an M2.5 by 6 RT screw. In the fasteners box, we are looking for a bag entitled Nextruder, and save yourself a ton of time and grab the fasteners bag 2 of 2. I glanced at it but didn't grab this for some reason and end up regretting it later. The Nextruder box that is enclosed. Inside of the Nextruder box, we are looking for the Nextruder heat sink, and that is the one that has a little bit of a hook on the end. It looks like this. And there is a small clear baggie that holds the Hall filament sensor, which looks very delicate. And that's all we need inside this smaller box for now. Inside the Nextruder bag, we're looking for the ball holder, which is a fairly small little black plastic part. And there is another small bag that is entitled Nextruder springs and magnets. And you will need one of these magnets that's the smaller size. I look around for the screw for quite a while. I thought maybe it was in that bag. I looked through every single screw, make sure that I'm not missing something's not below. And then finally realized that I was supposed to grab this bag, fastener 2 of 2, which makes sense. We're on chapter 5, so we're a little over halfway through the build. I go through everything in this bag and finally find it. And there's one spare, so really we're only going to use this one time. Step 3 is assembling the filament sensor. We will set the filament sensor in the heat sink in the same shaped pocket and very carefully attach it with a screw. Don't over tighten it because we can crack it. And then attach the ball holder in the following order: steel ball on the right, then the magnet, then the spring. And we'll put these parts in the Prusa ball holder with the steel ball up or out. So I make sure that I have the heat sink facing up so that that pocket is showing. You can see it here, that I can set the filament sensor into. And then I remove it from the bag and make sure that it is facing the correct way to set inside. It'll loop to the right, and that lines up really well. And I need just one of these screws to fasten it. I just kind of hand thread it in first, and this is how it looks. And then I just use one of the keys to gently tighten it. Now we'll get the spring and the ball out of this bag. I'm not really sure why it says magnets because there's not a magnet in it. There are 2 sizes of springs in here, and if you can't find the smaller one that you're looking for, it might be bundled up inside of a larger one. And then I get the little plastic that has the smaller magnets. I make sure to place the ball holder how it shows in the picture with the hole facing to the right. I get one of the magnets out, the other one is a spare, and then I put them in the correct order, so from left to right it's the spring, then the magnet, then the ball. It will look like this, and the magnet will help hold them all together. And then put all 3 of those inside the ball holder. It looks like the spring works really well. Step 4, we are going to put the ball holder in the heatsink. We need to make sure that the notch is pointing to the left and down. Prusa is calling that part a protrusion, and then we just attach that in. This is going on the back side, so we need to flip it over and have it facing like this. Be very careful that the lip or protrusion is facing towards the left and down, and then it just kind of snaps in. Step 5, we need the Nextruder idler assembly. So there's a lever B and a lever A, 2 small bearings, 2 small pins, an M3 by 6 screw, and then a tubular spacer. We will insert the pins into the bearings, place both bearings in idler lever B, Attach lever A and secure it with the M3x6 screw. Do not over tighten. The bearings must be able to rotate. And then push the tubular spacer, but rather than centering it, it needs to be flush with the bottom of the idler assembly part. In the printed parts box, we will find both of the idler levers. The bag is Nextruder 1 of 2, and these are the 2 parts. The other parts are in the Nextruder bag that we got out of the fastener box. These are the 2 bearings. And then I look on the bag to make sure that there are pins and the tubular spacer in here. My pin was attached on the outside of the magnetic Tupperware. At first, I cannot find the pins, and then I think I find them in the bottom. Those actually are not the right size. These fatter ones are spacers, and that's not what we're looking for. I realized when I set them down next to the bearings, they're just too big. The pins that we're looking for are in the bag that is entitled Spring and Magnet. As I continue looking for them, I do find the screw. I don't know if I'm just getting tired by chapter 5, but I just cannot seem to find these pins. But I know they have to be in the bag, so I look again, and there they are in with the springs. Now I can put the pins inside the bearings, and they do fit. I find idler lever B, which to me looks like a seahorse with his nose facing to the right. And I set the bearings in place. And this is how it looks. And then I grab the other side of the lever and slip that on top. It looks like this from the side. Then I attach the pin on the lower left side and the screw on the right side. And this is how it looks. And I keep the back side of the pin flush with the part. Step 7 is assembling the extruder. We need the PG case, which says Prusa MK4, the main plate, the PG assembly adapter, PG assembly, and the PG ring, which is gold. Also, we will need the extruder motor, 3 M3x25 screws, 1 spacer, 1 socket set screw, and the grease. In the printed parts bag, Nextruder 1 of 2 that we got the idlers from, we will find the MK4 face plate and the main plate, and the PG assembly adapter, which looks kind of like the trapezoid nut to me. In the Nextruder box, there is a large pink bubble wrapped item, and this is the PG assembly. To me, it looks like a double gearbox. And then below that in the box is a little clear plastic which has the gold PG ring. And the last part in the motor box is the extruder motor. I get the 3 M3x25 screws, the grease, and the socket set screw, which has 1 spare, so this is only going to be used once. And lastly, the spacer. I find mine in the Nextruder springs and magnet. I'm not sure if I slipped that in, but it was overall in the Nextruder bag of the fasteners. Step 9 is assembling the extruder. We will place that spacer over the shaft of the extruder motor. We will place the heat sink on the extruder motor and make sure that the motor cable is facing up, and the heat sink cables will be facing towards the right. Then we will set the main plate on the heat sink and make sure that the lower left side is where that kind of funny spot is. Okay, we'll start with setting the spacer in place, and it doesn't matter which direction this goes, but I'm sure it does need to be pushed all the way down towards the motor. I have the motor cables running out the top, so now I'm going to grab the heat sink and set that on top of the motor and make sure that these cables from the heat sink are not getting squished. They're going to be sticking out to the right. All of these steps say to attach, but really we're just setting in place. The next thing is the main plate, and you can see the little bit of a notch, and that one needs to be in the front left corner. Step 10 is assembling the gearbox. These instructions need to be followed carefully, so we do have a video to watch. I will link the Prusa video below. It's not letting me save it and splice it into my own. But to start, we will attach the PG adapter onto the assembly. Then we will put the gold PG ring onto the adapter, and the camper side needs to be facing down. and it needs to be completely flush with the adapter, the black piece. And it will look like this. And then we'll set the entire thing on the extruder motor shaft. We rotate the PG assembly until it drops down. And then we'll remove the PG assembly adapter, that's the black piece. Okay, so we're starting with the PG assembly, that's the silver gearbox looking thing, and we're going to take the black adapter and set it on top. There is, of course, a pocket space that it will kind of slip into, and it should fit fairly snug down in there. Then we'll take the PC ring, which is the gold one, and we need to make sure that we know which side the chamfer is. Honestly, I had no idea what a chamfer even meant, but there's a little bit of a slant on one side. It almost looks like a little bit of a diagonal on the cutout, and it's not on the other side. Of course, you can see the teeth on both sides, but you're looking for an actual slant down into the teeth, and on this side, it almost looks like it, but this side is more pronounced. It just has a little bit more of a lip. It's hard to see unless you're looking at it in person, but if you don't get it right, it's not going to slip in. So choose the side you think has more of a slant to it, and that one needs to be facing down. If it's not correct, it's not going to let you go on to the next step. And you want this gold ring to be completely flush with the adapter, so all the way flush with where the black spot ends. And that's also sitting flush with the silver gears that you see there. And you can see from this angle, I didn't quite have it all the way down. You can see the black still showing a little bit below the gold ring, so I just need to rotate it a little bit, wiggle it back and forth a little bit until it's completely flush. Now it's flush. Then we'll flip this whole assembly to sit flush on the motor, which feels weird because we haven't secured anything. Nothing is screwed in place, but we'll set this in place, and then we'll turn the black adapter until you feel things slip down. It's very obvious when it happens, and then you can remove the black adapter part. And this is what it looks like from the side. The gearbox has slipped in. Of course, there's still some loose parts, but you can see that the gears are slipped inside of the heatsink. Step 13 is checking the PG assembly, so we're going to put the adapter back on and rotate it so that we see how smooth everything moves around, that there's no resistance, and if so, we will remove the adapter. We don't need it anymore, and we want to make sure that the gold ring is sitting flush on the assembly. There should be no gap. Then we'll set the idler assembly between the PG ring and the extruder motor. There's a cutout in the space of the main plate. We want to line it up, and we'll secure it by putting the socket set screw in. Then we need to grease these gears. It recommends putting a little bit on a zip tie to make sure that you can put it in all the right spaces. Then we'll put the PG cover on. We need to make sure that the plastic ring is already inserted, and then use the M3x25 screws to tighten everything down but not over tighten. Okay, so I set the adapter back in place and everything turns really freely. I don't have any issues. I don't feel like there's any resistance. It's very smooth. Then I slip the idler into position, and from the side you can see that you're going to be putting the spacer side of the idler into the notched part of the black piece. And you might have to wiggle it a little bit to make it fit. Then you'll take this socket screw, which just looks like another spacer to me, and slip that into the same space. This helps you make sure everything's aligned how it needs to be, but it is going to stick up past the gold ring just a little bit, even after everything's aligned. You may want to move the idler back and forth a little bit just to make sure that everything looks good. Then we want to grease the gears a little bit. Their suggestion of applying a little bit to the end of a zip tie works well for me because you're able to get it where it needs to be without making too much of a mess, hopefully. It seems like we need to put it pretty much all around in these gears. And then I do wipe down the PG ring just to make sure that nothing's too messy. And then the cover that says Prusa MK4, mine does have the plastic ring on the inside. So I set it in place as if the cable is still going to go towards the top. And wiggle the screws into place. Everything is still fairly loose, so I want to make sure everything is lining up well, and then I can go back in with the screwdriver and make sure that everything's good. And then of course, once I've got the first one in, it feels secure, so I can just go in with the other two, and I don't have any issues getting those ones secured as well. And this is how it looks. It's starting to come together. Step 16 is assembling the idler swivel. We need the idler nut, both idler swivels, 2 M3x30 screws, 2 M3x20 RT screws, 2 M3NN nuts, which are kind of taller, 1 spacer 5.5 millimeter, and 2 of the larger springs. We will push the M3x20 RT screw all the way through one side of the idler swivel from the outside, slide the spacer onto the screw, place the second idler swivel from the opposite side, and then put the M3NN nut onto the screw and tighten just enough so it all holds together. On the opposite side, we'll insert the idler nut and secure it the same way with the M3x20 RT screw and then the M3NN nut. Everything should be able to move freely. These 3 pieces are the last ones in this bag. And then these screws are found in their own bag. There's 1 extra piece, so this is the only step that we're going to be using them on. We need 2. And 2 M3x30 screws. I feel like these are probably the longest screws that we have in this whole kit. These are the M3NN screws that are quite a bit thicker, and we need 2 of these. In the Nextruder bag, we are looking for the spacer. Just 1 of these, and it's a little bit larger than the M3NN nuts that we just grabbed. And 2 of the larger springs. That's all of the parts, so we can put this idler together. Both sides of these idler swivels are the exact same, so they can be interchangeable. We'll just start with one side, slip the screw in from the outside, and then we can add the spacer in the middle and put the other idler swivel on the opposite side. It will look like this, and now we can add the nut. I'm able to hand tighten it almost enough, but I do still need to tighten it a little bit more. I just need to get one of the keys to help me tighten it, and I'm able to just hold the nut on the other side in place so that it doesn't spin too freely. And now that part is complete. Now we can add the plastic idler nut, and we'll secure it the same way. We'll run the screw from the outside in through and through the nut, and then out through the other side as well. It does seem like I have to kind of hand tighten the screw to get it all the way through. And then I just hand tighten the nut onto the end of the screw, and this is what it looks like. Step 19, mounting the idler swivel assembly. We will set the spring on each of the M3x30 screws. Push the screws through the holes in the protrusion on the heat sink. Attach the idler swivel assembly on the screws. We need to make sure the correct orientation. You should be able to see the side with the 2 dots from the front. Okay, these are the 2 screws, and we'll slip the springs on, and you can see the holes along the bottom of where they need to go in. They'll just slide in, they're not going to attach to anything. And this is the correct way to attach it. The curved side from this angle is going to be towards the right. And the screws will start to slip in, but then you're going to have to start screwing them in with the key, and the goal is to make them flush with the side of the idler nut. You can see from this angle, you can see the 2 dots, but I still don't have them quite tight enough. From here you can see the one on the right is flush with the bottom of the bolt, but not the other one. And from the front you can see just the one on the right, you can see a little bit of silver, so I just need to tighten the one on the left a little bit more until it's the same depth. And then you can see that when I push the idler back, it locks into place. That's what we're looking for. Step 20 is attaching the extruder. We need 2 of the thumb screws, 3 of the M3x10 screws, 1 M3x4T grub screw, and the thermistor. We will insert the thermistor into the hole in the heatsink and secure it with the M3x4T grub screw, which is very small. Screw it all the way in, tighten gently but firmly using 2 fingers and the short side of the Torx key. Don't apply too much force, and then attach the 2 thumb screws onto the heat sink and just tighten a couple of times. The thumb screws are found in the Nextruder bag, and I add the screws. The tiny grub screw is found in its own Ziploc, and there's 1 spare, so this is the only time we're going to use it. The thermistor is found in the Nextruder box. It is the blue piece that you see here. We need to flip this piece over, insert the thermistor until it's flush with the black heatsink. And on the left, where you can see a little bit of silver from the thermistor, that's where we're going to be putting the grub screw in. And I'm able to hand tighten it a little bit, which makes me feel a little bit more comfortable that it's not just going to fall right out again. And then I tighten it with the correct size key. And then we'll need to flip it back over to where you can see the logo to be able to put the thumb screws on the side. I over tighten the first one and then just unscrew it a little bit to get it flush again. Step 22, we will attach the extruder to the printer. We will place the Nextruder up on the silver spacers on the X carriage. There is a cutout in the plastic part. Guide the thermistor cable through this cutout. Don't pinch any of the cables. Align the heatsink holes with the spacers and join the parts together with the 3 M3x10 screws. Start with the middle one. Okay, these are the 2 spacers that we're looking for. And then I set the Nextruder in its space, and I'm careful that the thermistor is not getting pinched. And I set the screw in the middle and just hand tighten it to secure it, and then I can get the Allen key and finish fastening it in place. And with just the one, it's going to hold it so that you can get the other screws inserted and tightened as well. Step 23 is connecting the thermistor. We will be using the cable channel on the left side of the X carriage. It's a little bit in front of where we slipped the other wires. We'll run the thermistor cable up through and connect it to the love board. Okay, so there's just enough space to be able to wiggle these cables into this channel, and then the plug that we're looking for is above what we had just plugged in on the love board. Step 24 is assembling the Hotend fan. We'll need that fan and 2 M3x18 screws. We will attach the fan to the heatsink with the screws and tighten the screws just gently. Make sure that the cable is pointing towards the lower left corner, and the sticker should be facing away from you, not visible. We'll plug it into the love board on the lower left side and make sure that the cables are tucked between the thumb screws. The Hotend fan is found in the electronics box, and it is the smaller of the 2 fans. This is the side with the sticker. We want that facing away from us, and the cable on the lower left side. Then we'll attach the 2 screws on the left side, and we'll run the cord up in between the 2 thumb screws like this. And then we want to plug it in on the lower left side. Step 26, we want to locate the Hotend assembly. Locate the hole in the heatsink from the bottom of the extruder and insert the Hotend into the heatsink. Gently guide the cables freely to the left. Push the Hotend assembly all the way into the heatsink, but there will be a little bit of a gap, just it won't let you go any tighter than that. And make sure that the Hotend assembly has the hot symbol on the heater block faces forward, so it's going to be pretty much straight. And you will tighten everything in place with the thumb screws. There are 2 cables that we'll need to plug in. The smaller one will go all the way on the upper left, and the larger plug will go on the kind of a gray spot. You can see the blue square right there on the picture. And the cables will need to be guided through the channel on the side. The Hotend is the last thing that was in the Nextruder box. This will go up through the bottom of the heatsink, and I'm being careful of how the cords are on the side. And I just tighten the thumb screws so that it'll hold it in place. And then I just make sure that that hot symbol is facing forward and that this Hotend is completely straight. I start with the thermistor cable, and I'm able to get that in place and get it plugged in. And the heater cable needs to be put in from the side on this upper gray area here. And that plugs in and locks as well. And I make sure to tuck the cables into the channel. Step 29, assembling the fan door. We'll need this kind of triangular piece called the fan door, the fan shroud, and the print fan. An M3x30 screw, 2 M3x10 screws, 2 M3x6 screws, and 2 magnets, with the warning to keep them apart from each other so that they don't break each other. In the printed parts box, we will find a bag called Nextruder 2 of 2, and this will have the fan door and the fan shroud. The other two pieces we'll use later on another step. The fan is found in the electronics box. This is the larger of the two. We've already installed the other one. Then we can get all of the screws out. The magnets are in the same Nextruder bag that we've been using. We're looking for the two large rectangular ones. Step 30, we'll start assembling the fan door by inserting the magnet into the pocket on the side of the fan door. Then we'll set the print fan next to the fan door and guide the cable through the fan door. Close them together and attach with 2 M3x6 screws and pull out any slack in the cable. Then we can attach the fan shroud with 2 M3x10 screws. This is the pocket that we're looking for. So we'll slip the magnet, one of the magnets, into that space. It's a little tricky to separate them. And then also I notice that I have a hard time getting this magnet into the space. It seems like there's just a little bit of, I don't know if something didn't bridge right or just not quite the right size. So I have to take a little bit of time to kind of make this pocket just a little bit bigger. And then I can get it in. And then I get the door and the fan laid out correctly and run the cable through it. There is a channel there where all of this will fit in. It'll look like this. Then we'll flip the fan around and kind of close it together so you don't see the sticker. Everything fits flush, and then we'll attach these together with 2 screws. And they go diagonal from each other. We want to flip the fan over so that the cable is running out the top left. And the fan shroud will slip on the right and just a little bit behind the holes on the fan. They kind of overlap and look like this. And we'll be using the 2 M3x10 screws. Step 32, we're going to see which direction the magnets need to face. So we'll get the loose magnet and bring it close up and see which side is going to attract. And that side we're going to mark with a marker. And then we'll insert that magnet into a spot on the X carriage with the marker side facing out and push it all the way into place. Then step 34, we can attach the fan door hinge on the X carriage, align the holes and insert the M3x30 screw, tighten it and then loosen it just a little bit so everything can move freely. This is the side with the magnet, so I can take the free magnet and set it up next to it and see which side pulls. And then I set it down with that side facing up so I can put a mark on it. I had put 4 dots all the way down it, so I slide this magnet in with that side facing out. And then I use the needle nose pliers to just make sure it's completely slipped all the way down. I set the fan door in place and make sure that the holes on the hinge are aligned. Then I can slip the screw down the hinge, and this doesn't just slip in, I do have to screw it all the way in. Step 35, connecting the extruder cables. The extruder motor cable will go on the top side. The colorful load cell cable will go on the right side on the top, and then the filament sensor will go on the right side just below that. And then on the left side we'll connect the print fan cable, which will be kind of in the middle of this board. We'll start with the extruder motor cable, and that goes along the top right here. On the right, the load cell cable, which is the twisted colorful one, will go on the top of these 2 openings. And then the filament sensor, the white one, will go below it. And on the left side of the machine, we will insert the fan cable. It will be the middle one on the far left. Step 37 is the love board wiring check. So I go through and make sure that everything is connected as it shows in the picture, and make sure that the idler mechanism is closed. I go through each of these and everything looks good as far as where it's plugged in, but when I get to the idler mechanism, I already had it closed, and I feel like when I try to open it, it's going to catch a little bit on the cables, so I have to adjust just my cable management a little bit just so that everything will flow a little smoother. Step 38 is covering the love board. We'll need to get these two parts out and an M3x10 screw. The smaller little triangle piece will cover these cables on the right. We need to make sure that the cables are looking like in the picture, and then we can cover them, make sure not to pinch any of the cables, and secure it with the M3x10 screw. And make sure that the screw is completely tightened in. We'll want to push all the cables so that everything is snug, and then we can slide the love board cover on the extruder from the top. Of course, make sure we don't pinch any cables, and then these two pieces should fit together. These two pieces are found in the parts bag. These are the two left after we remove the pieces for the fan. My cables on this side look good, so I set this in place and just make sure everything will slide inside okay. It looks good, so I will go ahead and secure it with the screw. Then I take the larger cover and slip that into place, and I do realize that there's a few things in the way, so I do have to adjust the cords a little bit again. But from the behind, you can see how this slips into place. It kind of overlaps with the X carriage a little bit. Looks good. Step 41 is tensioning the X-axis belt. We will slightly release all of the screws holding the motor. Then we can tighten the screw on the rear side of the X-end motor where you see the pink arrow. And then we need to check the belt tension each time. The belt should be a little bit hard to press with your fingers, and then we'll move the extruder all the way to the X-end idler and try the belt tension there. And when you achieve what you think, you can go ahead and retighten the screws again. Step 42, belt tension check. This is an optional step. We can check the website on our phone, and it'll give us a reading and let us know if it is too loose or too tight. So I start with loosening these screws on the left-hand side around the X motor. I feel the belts and they seem too loose to me, so I tighten the tensioner. This is the screw that you are going to be tightening or loosening. I click the link on my phone in the directions from Prusa, and then I select the MK4. Then I tap to enable the microphone, and I have to allow this. According to the video, you set this on the top rod of the X-axis. Mine is showing too loose, so I tighten the tensioner a little bit more. I over-tightened it, so I need to back it off just a little bit. And then I finally get it close in range. I'm at about 88, and as I keep strumming it, that is telling me that it is just right. And then I retighten the screws. I move it back and forth a little bit and make sure it is moving freely, and then also I redo the tension on my phone and just make sure that it's still looking good. And I'm still at 81, it says just right. Now we're on to step 44, and we can eat some more gummy bears. And we are done with this chapter, and we can move on to number 6. If you are enjoying these videos, consider joining my membership. Thanks for watching.